I couldn't find my key, and I'm like fumbling for my key, and mind you, I'm like, we're getting bombed, like boom, boom. They're coming in, and
it's not like that. Your Bears room's gonna do much though.
Yeah, it's not, but it's just
It's
like
like a psychological thing.
It's like something you got something at least. At least if I go with my belongings. You know, like Jesus.
Thank you very much for joining Tre and Ashley Baity, both Sergeant First Class from the Army. And from what I understand, you told me a little bit, you guys were drone operators while you were in the Army.
Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
Both did that. Cool. Well, usually what I kind of do is just say, it's your guys' story, however you guys want to tell it. And I usually kind of ask if we would go back, before the Army, where you guys are
okay.
So, get kind of an idea of who you are. And the thing that I really like to ask is where in life were you that made you think like the Army's the way that I want to go? You know what I mean? So yeah, if you guys would, just start us off from the beginning.
Okay. So my name is Tre. I'm originally from Columbus, Mississippi, and the reason I joined the military was because I actually had a son when I was 15, and it was rough growing up. And so I got a job and it wasn't working out for me. And I was just like, man, screw this. And I really didn't want him to grow up in the environment that I was growing up in. And I was like, man, I got to make a better way. I need to do it quick. I was like, man, I don't think college is the answer for me. And yeah, there was like factory jobs and whatever around. And I was like, man, that's not the life for me. So that was my driving factor to get it to join the Army.
I feel you.
For me, I really wanted to go high school to flight school and become like aircraft. Like, I don't know, whether it was flying jets in the Air Force or helicopters in the Army. That's what I wanted to do. But I did play basketball in high school and I was pretty good. And so a part of me was torn of which direction I wanted to go, like college in the basketball way or like becoming a pilot. Ooh. And my dad just sat me down and he was like, look, he sat me down. He was like, look, in 6 years, you can either have your education paid for and get out of the Army and they actually want to give you a job, or you can go to college, become in debt, and when you get out, get your degree in 6 years, it's still going to be highly competitive and you're going to be hundreds of $1,000s in debt. And I'm like, well, when you put it to me like that, I guess I don't really have much of an option. And so, straight from high school, I took the testing in the Army and my GT score was 1 point under what I needed in order to become a pilot.
Really? And
they wouldn't let me retest or anything. So the next best thing is to become a drone operator. And I'm like, okay, solid. Yeah. So that's how I got to where I was.
That kind of, man, it stinks they wouldn't let you retest. You'd think there'd be some app to be able to do that. But I mean, it's the Army. You never know with those folks.
Yeah.
And the way that went for me, my options, how I became a drone pilot was really, really simple, actually. The recruiter said, well, you can either be infantry or you could be some gamer. And I was like, gamer?
Oh, he got you. He knew.
He was like, yeah, a drone pilot. And I was like, a drone pilot? I guess I'll just take that. And that's how I became a drone pilot. So it was really simple.
Like an Xbox controller, hey, recognize this? This is the way.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, it was much different, but yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So you said you were doing basketball. Did you have scholarship prospects at the time or anything? Or?
No, at the time I went to a really small, I was from Northport, Florida. And at the time it wasn't well known at all. And so we didn't really have any college exposure or anything like that. So I was going to try to just walk on to the Georgia State University team.
Right.
But yeah, I didn't have any scholarships at the time. But after I swore in, I got educational like or academic scholarship, and I
Yeah.
was like, ah.
Yeah, of course. Like I signed the paperwork, and then yeah, then the in the mail comes, hey, here.
Yeah, yeah.
That's how life works.
I guess
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I wish, like, looking back on it, I would have gave myself more time after high school to like figure out myself in life before I just joined the army because it was like pretty much immediate for me.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally understand that. I mean, like I graduated high school and I just got a job because I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I just need beer money, you know.
Yeah, right.
So after a while, I think I was in a position kind of like you, Trey, where I was, I was working, but I didn't really care for what I was doing, and my prospects were not huge at the time. I tried college a little bit, and I wasn't ready for it at the time.
Mhm.
Like I liked school and I like to learn now. But yeah, at that time, I was just like, yeah, man, like these classes suck. So I withdrew, and then it was like, what am I gonna do? Like, well, the army seems important. Maybe I can make something happen there.
Yeah. And
Uh,
what did you do in the army?
I was in transportation.
Okay,
I was in
nice.
88 November, which is traffic management. What was your guys' MOS?
At first, it was a 15 whiskey, and then it changed to a 15 Charlie.
Okay.
And it's because they separated. At first, 15 whiskey was both a shadow and a gray eagle operator, and then they split it into two different MOSs. So the shadow operator was completely separate, different MOS than the gray eagle operators.
And those are two separate types of drones, I assume?
Yes,
Yeah.
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 I know very little. Like I have the baseline. Like I know what the Predator is, and that's about it.
That's what we flew, the gray eagle. It was the Army's version.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Okay. So both of you guys, so one straight out of high school, college theme sounds good. The other one, you had been working for a little while. You had a son. You were trying to make something happen. And the army sounded like it was the way to go. So is there like a pretty big age gap between the two of you, or?
No, well, when I was working, I was also in school.
Okay, so you were in high school at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's only 2 year. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around just kind of, I've never done a dual interview at one time. So just trying to get,
Well,
how
we've never done an
those
interview
stories at the time.
like this, a
Yeah.
podcast. So,
Well,
yeah,
thank you
same thing.
very much for allowing me to be the first.
Yeah.
So when you guys joined, so you guys had you grown up in the same area at all, or were you from two different
Oh no,
areas?
yeah.
Uh,
He's from deep South Mississippi. Well,
okay.
actually North Mississippi.
Yeah.
But I was from Southern Florida, Northport. So.
Okay. So you guys met later on while you were in the army.
Oh, that's a story in
Yeah,
itself.
we're gonna talk about that later on, but we actually met in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
In Afghanistan. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So his unit had been there, and then my unit was replacing his unit in Afghanistan. And that's not like when we fell in love or anything. That's just when we first met each other, like first crossed paths.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So before we get to that, if you would tell me, one of you, either one, when you first joined the army, you knew you were going to be drone operators. You were going in, basic training. What was that like for you guys coming from what it was before the army, and then all of a sudden, here I am getting screamed at and rolling through the mud.
Oh man, so for me, it was a tough adjustment, honestly. Yeah, it was really tough adjustment because like I've never been in a situation where I, didn't have, I guess, the dominant control
Okay.
or the ability to even stand up for myself. And so that was a lot, like to just watch myself being crushed.
Yeah.
um, yeah, because I remember getting off the bus. Uh, you got all the duffel bags. I think I had like three duffel bags, two in my lap and one kind of like over my shoulder. And I'm sitting on the bus and I got the other guy beside me and he's got his two duffel bags in his lap and the other duffel bag. And you just see rows and rows of this on the bus and this bus is just crammed. And I'm just like, what in the crap is going on? And and at this time, the drill sergeant, he's like being nice to us because we're like leaving I guess the reception. We're leaving the reception, and like basic training hasn't started yet.
Yeah.
And so we get on, like I said, we get on this bus and everybody's crammed, and it's like a good time, and or it's like a shock actually.
Like what's about to happen?
Yeah, like
talking with your buddy.
This is weird. This is
what
really weird.
When you get yelled at, oh, I'm gonna do this.
Well, the yelling hasn't even started yet. It hasn't even started yet. Like I said, the drill sergeant, they're like, they when they put us on the bus, they was like counting us out and making sure they, accountability, calling us all by name and putting us in order. And so nobody was being tough at this point, if you want to say that. And so we actually get to the place where and I'm at Fort Benning. That's where I do my basic training at. And so we get to the place, we get from like the reception to where we're actually doing where basic training is taking place at. And the bus stops and the drill sergeant said, "All right, you motherfuckers, everybody get the fuck off my bus now. And they just started screaming. I said, "Oh man!" And from there, that's just that's what you heard for the next 2 months.
Yeah,
man, I'm just like, man, this is crazy. And so it was a huge adjustment getting to basic training for me for that reason. But throughout basic training, like it got fun because it got competitive. You start getting you start meeting these people, you start becoming friends with these people. And, you start learning more about them and you start getting comfortable with them and, y'all all sucking together.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, you like doing stuff and you starting to realize like you're actually learning discipline.
Yeah.
Like you're the push-ups are getting easy. Like at this time, you're like, smoke me. Who cares? Like smoke me. I can do 200 push-ups anyway. It's whatever. And then you start looking out for your buddies and all that stuff. So and then the dynamics change. It becomes it's not new, it's not fearful. Now it's like I'm just looking out for you and you got my back and oh man, I'm learning so much about this dude and I'm learning how to shoot and I'm learning how to do combatives and I'm climbing up these ropes and I'm learning how to tie knots and man it's really quite eventful once you get past the fear of it.
Yeah.
That's what I'd say.
Yeah, for me, it's like you start it's like a roller coaster of emotions, right? So we drove from Tampa to South Carolina on the bus, and then we get there and they don't feed you, right? So they fed us before we got there, but then we were in the reception area for hours and hours. You can't say anything, you can't do anything except just fill out the paperwork, whatever they tell you. And so I'm like, okay, I'm thinking in my head, like, when's the next time I'm going to eat? I'm getting kind of hungry. And then they give you the famous Jimmy Dean's.
Yeah.
the 10 meals. Oh, man. And then so I ended up just not eating that. And then in reception, it's like, it kind of hits you like, what decision did I just make? You know what I mean? Like you're going through the line, you're getting 1,000 shots at one time. And they just herd you through like reception, like cattle, basically. And you're getting all your gear. You can't, like, you're like, how am I supposed to even fit all this stuff into these duffel bags? And then you're like trying to figure it out. And there's like no guidance at all, nobody to help you. And you're standing in line for hours upon hours in these boots and your feet. I literally couldn't feel my feet at all. They were just numb. And then I'm like, okay, and then it's like, you feel homesick. You're like, why did I make this decision? And like, you just feel so bad. And then it's time to go to basic. And when we were on the bus, one of the girls who came from Tampa with me, so we were kind of not close, but you learn in the Army that like, you could be with somebody a week and spend 24/7 with them and you get real close real quick with them. Oh. And so we were on the bus going to basic and the drill sergeants had us hold our bags in our laps and then put our face in our bag. And the bus turned a corner and she fell out of her seat And I looked back like, oh my God. And the whole bus looks back and then she started yelling at us, put your fucking heads back in the bags. I'm like, how am I not supposed to laugh? She just fell out of her seat. And then, yeah, the same thing when we got to basic, it was the drill sergeants like yelling at us, and then they told us to put our bags down, and then we had to find the bags with our names on it and like start being like acting as a team and like helping each other, or if we didn't do it within 10 seconds they would smoke us, like, yeah. So it started from there, and then I think in basic
Dump your stuff out and make it.
yeah, but then yeah, like you said, as you grow in basic you start becoming more confident, like, oh, I can climb this huge ladder and rappel down this wall and like do all these things. You start building confidence and team, like the team camaraderie and stuff. And I think this is so embarrassing, but one of the most memorable moments that stands out to me in basic training is we walked to it was July 4th, and we like marched to a parade field, and it was like far, far, far away, and we sat there all day in the sun. And then we watched the fireworks, and we couldn't move because we were basic. We just had to sit there all day in line. And then we watched fireworks, and right before the fireworks, they gave us the famous Jimmy Deans again. And we started marching back after the fireworks to the barracks. And I'm talking about like this was probably a 10-plus-mile march.
Yeah.
And I feel like I have to go to the bathroom. And I'm like, oh, this is great. I'm talking about it's July 4th. The whole division is out, like, marching right now, you know, like, oh. And so I'm like, how am I supposed to get out of this and go to the bathroom? And I'm like, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to make it. So I'm like holding, like trying not to, you know, shit myself. Yeah. And then when we get back to the barracks, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just want to go to the bathroom. And they have to do the pat down. I forget what they call it. To make sure that you don't have any contraband.
Okay.
Yeah, they start like patting us down, making sure we don't have contraband. And sure enough, 2 people had contraband. And you know, in basic training, like it's not they fucked up, you know, it's they fucked up, so now everybody pays. And so I'm like, I don't know if I have number 2 on my booty or what. And I'm like, oh, they're coming to do my pat down. I'm like, please, please, please. Please don't go back there. And then finally they let us go, and I ran straight to the bathroom. I was like, oh my God. Luckily we were clear.
God. I
There
feel
was no problems, but
one of those, like you say, you learn like a PT test, you know, before a PT test,
yeah.
like you make sure you make the bathroom happen no matter what.
Yes, because you don't know what's about to happen.
I knew one dude, he ran off in the woods and did it in the middle of PT test, still passed. Luckily,
Still passed.
yeah.
Oh man.
Oh man.
What was around on that?
You can learn something from that guy.
You know?
You can learn a lot from that guy.
Yeah.
It's just like, man, I don't think I would have. I was never super strong in PT, even when I was at my best. I mean, there was times like where I got close to maxing when I was doing nothing but exercise.
Yeah.
But it's the PT part was never like my strong suit. So yeah, looking at that guy, I'm like, I would not have time to be.
I know. To go poop and then get back on. And we were talking too about how it's like the smokers who like they'll be smoking like 2 to 3 cigarettes before the PT test, and right before they run, they're like ready, set, and they take a last puff and then they throw it on. They're like, go, and they are the ones to win every single time. Top 10 in the God. And they're so old too. Half the time, they still beat everybody.
Yep.
Some people just got it like that, man.
I know.
One of my best battles, he hit this dude. He has like something weird, like a vitamin K deficiency. So like what he did, he was ripped all the time. And like if he exercised just like, you know, when it came to a PT test, he would start like 2 weeks before, just kind of getting himself back into shape, and he'd max it like no problem.
That's crazy.
You know, me is like 3 a days, every day, all the time.
Right.
Barely make.
I'm over here making sure I don't drink soda or eat something that's going to mess up my stomach the night before.
For sure. So your guys' basic experience sounds wildly different than mine. So a lot of people don't even know about reception. You know, I tell people,
oh, yeah,
basic training is 9 or 10 weeks, depending on where you are. And then, but you have a week worth of reception, sometimes 2 weeks,
Yeah.
and tell those people like, oh yeah, you got to go there for a week before you even technically start. And you
Right.
guys are talking about how like the drill sergeants are instructing you through reset. That was not, nah, man, not me. I got off the plane onto a bus and we drove up onto post. And like when we got to reception, the person comes on the bus and just, why the fuck are you still on the bus? There, it was over. It was there
Over.
was no, oh, we're gonna get you through reception, then you go down range. It was like, you think this is bad? This is nothing. Wait till you go down range. They're 10 times as worse as the drill sergeant.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
Yeah.
it was nuts.
That's crazy.
I
I
don't think
have
I
like,
slept for 2 days when we first got there, just like filling all the paperwork out. And we finished all
yes.
the in processing at like 4 in the morning or like 3:30.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
Like they
I remember
go
that.
for
Yep, I
hours.
remember that.
here's your bunk. You sit down, and then Revelry starts playing, and it's like, oh, time to get up. Let's go.
Yeah. Like
Like I haven't slept for 2 days. What the fuck?
Yeah,
what?
I remember that. But
Yeah.
then the cool stuff happens in basic training too, where like you low crawling and getting 249 shot over the
Yeah,
head
with tracer
night
rounds.
with tracer rounds. Like,
Yeah.
man, that's just super cool. Or
Nick-
going to the range for 3 days, doing the snipers or the grenade range. And
Yeah. It's like it becomes fun once you get past the fear.
yeah,
It's like I guess that's true. Like once you
get
get
past the fear in him.
well, no, once you get comfortable with being uncomfortable, things start getting fun.
Yeah. And the drill sergeants, at least ours, they calmed down a little bit, like on range days, unless you fucked up.
Yeah.
Yeah, true,
Yeah.
true.
They're,
But
they're
by that time, you like midway through basic.
yeah, well, and
So
they
you
also
can-
don't want like a full metal jacket situation going where they're
Yeah, that's true.
someone's
That's true.
psyche while they're walking around
That's
with
true. 'Cause that's a real thing too.
That is crazy.
Yeah, that's wild.
Did y'all do the what do they call it, UMT round, UTM rounds? Like were you actually shooting chalk out of your gun, the chalk rounds?
The chalk round, no.
Like we actually got to do that where we was like clearing houses, and if you saw somebody, you could like light
You
them up.
put houses and stuff, but it wasn't like with chalk rounds.
Yeah, see, a lot of companies did like the blanks, but
Yeah.
we actually had like the chalk round
That's cool.
at Benning.
I never.
Oh, because you were at Benning, that's why.
Yeah,
I wonder if that's something since Benning is an infantry base they
I
had
think so. Yeah,
available. What year were you guys? Did you guys go in?
2013 for me.
12.
Okay, so you guys came in a few years after me because it was a lot of stuff changing. Even when I went in, they first started our basic doing some new model the Army had just released, and like halfway through it wasn't working. So they're like, "Yeah, we're throwing this in the trash," and they went back to the old.
Mm.
So yeah, so in those 4 years, at least from others that I've talked to who were in that time, there was like a lot of stuff that had changed, and like you say, depending on what base you were on and what they had available to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I've never heard of chalk rounds. We had the blanks, and we did.
Yeah,
stuff.
we have blanks too.
Yeah.
Oh, and the other thing we were talking about the other day that's crazy is I'm from Florida, right? So I'm used to the heat
Yeah.
and the humidity and stuff. But people came from like Colorado or Wisconsin or Oregon and stuff like that. And they came and they were like, I'd never even heard about passing out from heat strokes or having heat seizures or anything like that. And some days, like there'd be 10 to 15 people just dropping, like passing out. And I'm like, what's going on? But like in basic training, there's not open communication. So you're just thinking in your head, like, what is happening around me? You know, these people are just passing out and they're having like ice sheets thrown on them and stuff. And then
I remember the first time I see somebody pass out, I was like, man, because it wasn't one person. It was like people were dropping out on
in
formation.
formation.
Yeah, like 5 people just like dumbing them, but they not like side by side. It's just like random people falling out. I'm like, man, these people got something, man. That's what I'm thinking to myself, man. These people got something. They're passing out. We need to get out of here.
Oh man.
Yeah, I see. I was the opposite. I went to Fort Knox, and it was like 10 degrees,
Oh yes.
rain the entire time. So being someone who's also from Florida, yeah, I was miserable up there. So like some
My-
ranges were really fun. Other ranges were laying in a pool of ice water, miserable.
Yeah, see, and I went to Fort Drum, New York. That was my first duty station. And being from Florida, I had never seen snow. And like they had us doing PT out until it was negative 30 degrees. And the whole base can't go to the gym. So they forced you to do PT outside.
Yeah.
And I hated my life.
Negative 30.
Negative 30 degrees. I hated my life.
Only imagine. That's like your eyeballs freezing.
Yes, like literally your eyelashes are sticking together because it's so cold.
That's crazy.
Wow. That's wild. So where do we go from there? You said your first duty station was Fort Drum. You went there. Well, okay, I'm sorry. Let me back up a little bit. Then it goes to AIT.
Yeah.
So where is drone AIT at?
Fort Huachuca, Arizona.
Arizona, Fort Huachuca.
Okay.
So how it was when I went through is you do like the ground school, which is it incorporates like the basic fundamentals of flight, period.
Like all aviators go through.
Yep. So like if you're a helicopter pilot, drone pilot, big, small, doesn't matter. Like everybody goes through this course. And so we did that. And then at that point, when I went through, they were just like randomly picking, like you go to Shadow, which is a smaller platform, and then they say 1, 2, 1, 2, they just number everybody down the line. And if you was 1, then you go to Shadow, and if you was 2, then you go to Gray Eagle. And I went to Gray Eagle. So I didn't learn the Shadow platform at all.
Yeah,
I didn't cross train at all.
Gotcha.
But the Shadow, like I said, is like the smaller platform, and the Gray Eagle is the Predator size platform.
Okay.
So yeah, we just trained on that. I think if I'm remembering correctly, it was you was either day shift, swing shift, or night shift. Yeah, graveyard shift. And yeah, you just literally went to class, and I mean, you was pretty. When I went through, you was free. Like when you went to class, you know, you just it was just like going to really it was just like going to college.
They messed it up for us.
Well, we messed it up for everybody because it was so lenient. Like our basic training was literally like college. Like when you was at school, you was at school, and when you was at home, you could either be studying or you could be partying. We wasn't supposed to be going to other cities, but we was going to like Tucson, and oh man, it was crazy. We was out 2 and 3 in the morning. It was nothing to do, but we were just doing stuff.
Yeah. We're forced to do something now instead of 10 weeks of having every second structured.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. But yeah, so when I went through, it was fun. It was me going through college.
Yeah.
But when she went through, from what she tells me, what she's about to tell you, it was a little bit different.
Yeah, when I went through, it was so strict, like very strict. You had like phases, like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, and at each phase you have more privileges, I guess you can say. But really it didn't matter. Like you could, even if you had all full privileges, like you can go off the base for a little bit, and you would call it cab. It was like a van, and you paid $5. You can go anywhere.
See, that was another thing. We had our own cars.
Yeah, we didn't even have cars. So we mostly just got tattoos during the day and then came back. And some people did dumb things still and snuck out or whatever and got in trouble. But mainly it was, for us, we had a very long AIT. Our AIT was like a year and a half long, sometimes longer for people. So most people's AIT is a lot shorter.
Yeah.
For other MOSs. And for me, I was on grave shift most of my time there. And so it sucked because like we couldn't really eat at the DFAC during the DFAC hours. So they would give us like bagged lunches. So I remember like in basic training, I went from, I'm 5'6", and before I got in the Army, I was probably like 135 pounds. When I went to basic, they make sure they feed you. And so and you're working out like 24/7. So I was big. I was like 160, but I was muscular when I came out. And then I went to AIT, and by the time I got out of AIT, I was like a twig. I was like maybe 120. I was tiny because like they didn't feed us. Yeah. And we didn't have like a kitchen or anything to like cook in. And the one thing that I hated in AIT was the fact of like, I mean, this was throughout the whole Army while you were in the barracks, but in AIT, they like messed with you. Like they would like come in your room at like 2 o'clock in the morning, the drill sergeants, and bang on the door and then just come in and like that like slight gave me a little bit of PTSD. I'm not like kidding, because it's like you're like at peace, like your most vulnerable state of sleep, and you feel like you have somewhat of privacy in AIT, and then they just strip you of that too. Or like even taking drug tests and they're like, are you gonna go pee? And you're like, with your pants down, like, yes, I'm gonna go pee, I guess. Like that stuff like kind of bothered me because they got way too personal for me. And after like a prolonged period of time doing that and like just having no escape, no you, just like you're there, just staring at walls, like literally felt like you were in prison.
Yeah.
And then being on graveyard shift, you know what I mean? It was like, to me, I think that's when like my mental state started going down in the Army. Because that was tough. Real tough for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it happens in ways too, like she just hit on the mental state. I think like in basic you had those mental flips to like where you kind of get depressed or just shocked beyond your imagination. And that kind of puts you in a depression. But then, like I said, like the team building and all the stuff you're learning, once you realize it, it takes a little while, but once you realize it, it becomes fun because you become comfortable with being uncomfortable in those situations. Yeah. And then the same thing, like, as you going up in rank, E1 through E3, you're pretty much you're doing your thing. And you don't really have that many responsibilities for the most part, depending on situations. But for the most part, E1 through E3 don't really have those responsibilities. Just kind of like you figuring out your place in the Army or in the service.
Just make sure you're there at the right time, in the right uniform.
Yeah. As long as you can, you know what I'm saying? Like you just engraving those foundations within yourself. And then you learn how to build upon that new foundation of being in the right place, right uniform, making sure before I leave, I know I know the right place, right uniform. And I realize that when I'm at home, I'm, if I get this text message, I got to reply or whatever, or, there's a radius that I can't surpass now. Like you just start learning those things and then you just start to progress because you start picking up, you start going further within your career. And then you go to E4 and E5 to where you become a team lead or something to that nature. You establish, leadership and people go up under you or fall up under you. And then you like, okay. And then you get excited about that. And then you get depressed about that. And then you figure out how to, you establish, because you go through that depression, you figure out, okay, I'm depressed because I'm overwhelmed, but what can I do right now to figure out how to make this differently for myself? And then you figure that out. You create these systems and you put this person in charge of that and yada yada, and you start building other people, and that builds you. And then it's like, oh man, it's really not that bad. And then you get promoted, and then you get depressed again.
Yeah,
you get happy. It's just like waves all over the place, but. For the most part, like
stay comfortable for long.
Yeah, exactly. They just keep building you, like, or you can sit. There's some people that get comfortable and they sit, but yeah.
Well, and there is a certain amount of logic to that because with comfort comes complacency.
Right.
Yeah.
You get used to something, you got to change it up every once in a while, and a lot of people like to use indoctrination as a dirty word, but it's also one thing that's it's necessary in a certain aspect because you're being asked to do some fucked up stuff, like to be totally honest about it. And it's like, if you can't handle getting yelled at, how are you going to handle, deploying overseas? And
that's real. And I think in this generation, it's like hard because, there's all these, you can't say this, you can't do this, you can't do that. And it like makes you weaker. You know what I mean? And it's like, I saw that on my deployments from our progression of deployments, like by the third deployment, like the people who were younger were having a hard time dealing with the stresses of being downrange.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Did you guys have like cell phones in basic training? Were you allowed?
No.
because they were experimenting with. They had a couple of posts that would let them have,
Really?
or they would let them have them on the weekends or stuff like that. I don't know. However, the those went, but it's the biggest problem I always had. It's the pendulum swing. So like the army,
Right.
like Trey, your experience was like, oh yeah, I'm in college. This is cool, whatever. And then Ashley's experience is like, this fucking sucks.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
if it could have stopped that pendulum somewhere in the middle of that,
Right.
found a way to get a little more structure back into AIT, but
And
not
that's indoctrination right there.
blocks, you know.
Yeah, like once you find that sweet point, like this is the limits that you can go as soldiers, you know what I mean? And that's why I think indoctrination enforced in the proper way is extremely beneficial. And like even if you think about any successful person, they have routines, they have structure, they, you know, they have like I get up at this time, I do X, Y, and Z, and they have purpose behind everything that they do. And I think so in that way, the army has taught us and set us apart from like
Yeah, for sure.
the majority of the world, you know?
For sure.
No, but yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly just it's that finding that what works to make sure. And I know they're having a real hard time. I was speaking to somebody else, like with physical standards and stuff, because just
Right.
the general population is a lot bigger, and we don't do sports as much in in schools and things. And so the army trying to navigate and find that middle ground. And then you talk about these current generations. I remember right as I was getting out, they were starting to come to us because I was an E5, I was sergeant. They were starting to come to us and ask us what they thought about like us handling new soldiers coming in and things. That I remember having discussions and saying to some of the older sergeants, like, when your young guys are asking why, they're not questioning your authority. We're living
Right.
in the information age. Everybody
Right.
has all the world's knowledge in their pocket at all times.
Right.
So many more people these days just need to understand what it is they're doing, how it works, why they're doing it, and they'll still do it.
Right. Exactly. That just
Don't
proper
just like,
communication.
yeah, they don't just do like, hey, you do this and then they go, which a lot of some things should work that way, sure, but a lot of people were having a real hard time understanding and accepting that. And it's like the art,
Right.
we gotta find this somewhere in the middle of
Yeah, and I think too, like
and
the older generation is so stuck in their ways, and the younger generation is like they're different. You know what I mean? So yeah, they do have their negative, just like the older generation had their negative, but the younger generation also has their positive. You know what I mean? They're extremely tech savvy, like they're extremely resourceful. You know, like they can go pull up a regulation. Like I have the younger soldiers like pulling up regulations says, Sergeant, it says this. Like, okay, yep, you're right. You know, like they're very resourceful. So yeah, I think it's just, you know, like you said, the military navigating that path and finding that middle ground and balance.
yeah,
And then to kind of caveat, like on the flip side of that, just because me and Ashley, we used to, well, I don't know if you did, honestly, but it's sometimes like we used to have like the NCO PDs or whatever,
Yeah.
and I started to realize that,
professional developments.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly, the NCO, yeah, professional developments, and so I started to realize that just basically what y'all was saying, like the whys, like the young generation is asking the whys because they're so this is how they learn, like this is how they communicate, like they just need to know why. They're not questioning
Yeah.
the authority at all. They just, this is the why is what drives them,
Yeah,
right? And because the older generations never asked the whys, they
Yeah.
just did what they were told.
Right. They
They
didn't.
don't even know
Yeah.
what the why is. And so the frustration comes because you're asking me something that really you put me on the spot and I don't know the answer half of the time. Like that's the truth.
Yeah, because I mean, honestly, they don't know the reason why because they were never told the reason why,
Yeah.
you know, like it's
Yeah.
just shut up and do. And I think that's why I got out of the military because it came to a point like on the deployments and everything where it's just like you do start to ask why, you know, like why am I doing this? what's actually going on here? What is my purpose for doing these things? Like, because you have to answer to yourself at the end of the day. And like, you're trying to justify your actions in your own head and your subconscious. And when you can't do that anymore, then you start to like ask externally, like, why? And when you find the wrong answers in your head that you assume are the wrong answers, or like you don't find good answers, then it kind of like it pushed me away from the military in that aspect.
Mm-hmm. Or you start to, because you have rank, and you start to be in these meetings, the higher up meetings, and you start to realize more truth behind, like that is really going on. And then because of the information age, you start piecing stuff together, and you're like, wait a minute now, like, and then you start to question things, and you like, man, how can I make them do something that I don't
agree with myself? And that was a huge thing for me, was the vaccine thing. Like, I don't even agree with this, and you're making me force my soldiers to get this vaccine, like you're making me fill out chapter paperwork, sending them on their way, some of them single parents and stuff, and like, just, you want me to do that, to these people, just because they don't want to get this vaccine. Like, like that like drew the line for me, honestly. Like, after, because we had went from a deployment on COVID, kind of like during COVID. And then
when COVID hit, I was stuck in the Philippines.
Yeah. And then within 2 weeks of him getting back from the Philippines, we deployed together to Iraq.
We'll get to that later.
But anywho, right afterwards, we got back from Iraq, they started implementing the vaccines and everything. So from our deployment to that, I was just like, I was done.
Pretty rough situation to go from next. Okay, yeah. So like Trey was saying, I think that'd be a good point to try to back up a little bit in AIT. And when you guys said yours was a year, like that didn't surprise me in the least. I'm sure some people out there that will find that kind of surprising, because there are a lot of AITs. I was gearing up to go to AIT for I was reclassing at the time. And I would have to go to interrogation school and learn language and all that kind of, and it's like language school was 6 to 8 months depending on the language.
Yeah.
Interrogation school was 6 to 8 months, and so I didn't end up following through with it. But it's like that's a lot to learn, and
it is.
Learning the basics of I don't even know what the words, aerodynamics or aeronautics, whatever the term is, like having that base understanding of how these things even fly before we know how to fly them. That's incredibly important. And like I said, I think that there are a lot of people out there that will be very surprised, but like, hey man, like that took like a year, like to be proficient at it.
And so the way that works is, like I said, you go to ground school, and that probably takes, I don't even remember, but
I don't even remember.
2 to 3 months. You learn, like, that's the ground school is like what every pilot, helicopter, fixed wing, doesn't matter, goes through this. Like I said, you just learn the fundamentals. You learn what keeps things in the sky. You learn how that works. And then you go to your platform specific, and
before that, you go to target ID. So you're also not just learning how to fly an aircraft, but you're also learning like target identification, like different types of tanks, weapons, and everything, like how to identify and distinguish one from another. Mm-hmm. And that was an extremely hard class for me, honestly, because I'm like, I don't know the difference between these two 1980 Russian tanks. I have no idea,
Well, yeah, and it gets even more dialed down than that. You're talking about the tanks all the way to like the motorcycles, to long rifles, to different rocket launchers. Like, you got to know Russia's, what's China's, what's American. Like, it's a lot. There's a crap ton coming from. Man, I barely know a handgun from a rifle. Well, not me per se, but like for other people.
I imagine a lot of people, especially if you're young, straight out of high school, like say unless you grew up doing that.
Exactly.
Right.
Like if you country boy like me, that is probably, you know, you don't have to learn the American part of it, but it's still a power curve to learn like the Chinese versions of all this stuff, and then the Russian version of all this stuff, and then you got to learn it in what it looks like in normal vision versus IR.
Yeah.
So it's just like, man, come on.
Yeah.
And then you only have 2-3 months to learn this stuff.
Yeah. It's all super accelerated. It's, you gotta hit the ground. So do you know at all if that was always a part of that school, or is that because when I was in the drone pilot thing was a big deal. You had a lot of drone pilots that were getting like UCMJ and stuff, like you say, for target identification, for hitting the wrong stuff, even though they were following orders and things like that. You know, did that get it? Was the school expanded upon because of situations like that, or
we were kind of like, okay, so you know, the drone realm is relatively new, right? And there's different aspects of it. Like, infantry guy can go out and they have their little drones that they throw up, right? Which those are like a lot different than what we fly and what the Shadow is. And so before our generation was kind of like the first generation of establishing an actual drone program.
Okay.
And they weren't even a part of like a unit. They were a part of a task force.
Okay.
And I don't know too much about that generation. I know a little bit just because they were like our leaders. But they would deploy on like a task force, and it was very small community. Even now it's pretty a small community, but not like it was. And so then they kind of developed from a task force out to, okay, now we're going to have 10 units of drones or whatever. And so they would attach like the Great Eagle would be attached at a higher echelon. And it was always kind of weird because like we were like a division asset, but we fell under brigade, but we were tied to a battalion for like admin purposes. Yeah. So it was like really weird. And we deployed on a separate schedule than anybody else. Like we didn't deploy with anybody else in our unit except like our unit, like just Grey Eagle.
Yeah.
And the Shadow deployed with battalion. But yeah, and so we worked for higher echelons throughout our entire career. And as far as like it being implemented in the school, I think it was implemented in the school all from the jump, because we are a gunnery platform. So gunnery is included in everything that we do.
Okay.
Shadow, I don't know too much about Shadow, but when we went to our first units after AIT, we basically stood up the unit. So everybody who was there initially, like developed all the standard operating procedures, developed all like the mission coordinator programs, developed like even a procedure to fit in with the airspace, and worked with Tower and worked with ATC to implement those things. Because when you have, you know, a drone come into an airspace, it's scary to a lot of pilots, and rightfully so. And so there's a lot of things that have to get worked out. And we were a part of us working with the older generation who was a part of the task force, like pretty much started the units. The whole program.
Wow. So you guys were ground floor on making it its own.
We're not the OGs, but we're a part. We're triple OG.
Yeah.
Well, when you say that it eventually became two separate MOSs, but you guys were before that when they were, you know, like, oh, it was one MOS, and then you just got a profession within that, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, that's super interesting to learn that. And when you say ATC, is that air traffic control?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So like going around and just being like, hey guys, you're going to see drones flying around. It's okay. It's us. They're ours.
Well, you have to work with Tower, because Tower, they don't, or like ATC, they don't know how like your platform operates, right? Like, you know, if you have an emergency, if you go lost link, like what altitude are you going to? What's a good location for you to go loiter at that's away from everybody else? Like all those things have to get coordinated with the air traffic control, because they own the airfield, you know? And so they.
Were you?
Oh, okay.
She getting too deep.
I was gonna
So,
say, yeah.
so was she before she? How old were you at?
Okay.
So the aircraft is very very smart. Is very very smart. But we like in school during AIT, part of our training is to learn how to program the aircraft to do the things that we want it to do. In the case, because our aircraft, like we don't just fly it, like we taxi it from the hangar, on the up to the runway on the taxiway, like everything. Like we have to drive this thing, and you can't see
It's like looking
what's
through a
left and
straw.
right. You can just see what's in front of you
Really?
as the driver. So
Yeah.
you're like driving like this, and
You think you have a
and
better
then you have and then you have the other person that's beside you, like she's beside me. She would be my eyeball, so she can look left
Yeah, I
and
can
right.
look left, right with the payload.
So what I do as a driver, I'm like this, and I say, and I'm like, okay, I see the line. I'm about to stop, and I say, hey, is anything coming left? Anything coming right? And she would say, nope, you're clear left.
Yeah,
You're clear right.
right.
And that's how you have to drive this thing.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. And like you're driving with, like, it's not a joystick like this. It's a freaking, like you're driving with your thumb. It's sometimes
Yeah.
Old arcade cabinet.
like they did everything they could to make this complicated as possible.
And there's a delay too.
And there's a
Yeah.
delay.
Of course.
So when I push forward, I have to count 1, 2, and then the aircraft outside is actually going to move forward. It's not immediate.
Yeah.
So it's just like, oh my God. But like eventually your
You can
brain
use
wraps around all of that and it becomes like so fluent.
Yeah.
But now you can pick back up where you were. So and like I said, so you're programming this aircraft, and what she's saying, like, okay, you have link with the aircraft. You won't link with the aircraft all the time, but sometimes you lose
Your link is your control.
Yeah.
And so when you lose control, you lose communication with the aircraft. The pilot that can only see, what's directly in front, he can't see anything. Then the person that was looking left and right, they can't see anything. And the person that was the pilot that was driving the thing, if we're on the ground, if you lose link, you can't tell it to stop. You can't tell it to, brake, or you can't tell it, how is the aircraft coming this way? You need to do whatever you need to do. Like you have to program it all on the ground. So you have to set all of those parameters
to make sure everything's functional, fully functional.
And so that being said, from looking around the aircraft and logging all your books and all that stuff, like for a beginner, that can take 2 hours. It can take 2 hours to get this aircraft in the air.
Yeah.
But once you establish like downrange, when you're on a deployment, you can get up in the air in 30 to 45 minutes.
Because you're just
you get so used to it.
Yeah.
And like when you're in the air flying it, if you lose link, it has different parameters. So like if you're still within tower, like if you're still within the airfield, you're still close to where I'm located as the driver, then it does something different than if you're way out.
You have it programmed. Like, okay, if I'm within here, you go fly here at this altitude. If we're out here, you go fly here at this altitude.
Cause not to scale, because I'm not gonna get this out, but the aircraft can fly like so far. Like I'm here in Florida, and I can have the aircraft in California.
Yeah.
And I can have it in California for hours and hours and hours. And then fly it back, land it here, and you would never know I was there. So it's that scale that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And if it lost link, then I would make it come back to me so I can figure it out whenever it got here. And so then it would be flying in the air for hours. But I know exactly where it's at because I programmed it to be at this altitude, at this location, and fly in this direction. So I know exactly where it's at exactly what time, even though I can't see it. So it's crazy. It's complicated, but it's crazy.
Along the school is making a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's complicated.
So much more than just like, like I fly, a little plane. I shouldn't say little, but a smaller plane. But it being able to pre-program and have it those responses, like if signal lost, return to base.
Exactly. And that's what you're learning in school, or per se. That's what you're trying to learn in school. Because if you program this thing, if you fat finger, let's just say if you hit, I want this aircraft to be at 12,000 feet. while I'm while I'm coming down, and I put one too many zeros, or I miss up a zero, like that could be very, very bad.
Detrimental. Like you
Trying
can
to
be
break orbit and fly off into space.
Yeah.
like, or no, you can hit other aircraft. You can run into mountains. You can, do some bad things.
And you're trying to do this while, like she was saying earlier, because she's excited about this podcast. She was talking about when we deploy. She was saying like, anyways, I forgot, but she was talking about how detrimental it is. But she was talking about how like you don't get sleep. She was talking about not deployment. She was talking about basic training. But yeah, you don't get sleep because you're on these schedules, and you're having to remember not to forget that that's supposed to be 3 zeros and not 2.
Yeah,
like because it's
while sleep
so it's a lot.
while
It's
hungry,
a lot. It's taxing.
While tired.
Right.
Yeah, it's very taxing. It's very taxing.
A lot to training your mind to operate under. Oh, I just remember what I was going to say now. The stress. So like there's good stress and there's bad stress.
Right.
And like you talk to a psychologist and they can tell you these things, but a lot of people in general, it seems today, like we were talking about the current generation, it seems to be like just stress adverse. Like we can never have any stress ever. And
Right.
like I understand the desire for that because sure, I have a family. I would love to be stress free for more than several hours at a time. But some of that stress is good. Like when I was overseas and my first 6 weeks there was we were working 12 14-hour shifts and it was 7 days a week.
Yeah.
I
No
didn't
breaks.
pay off for 6 weeks.
Right.
But it didn't bother me so much. Like it was rough, but what I was doing was I felt was good and I had purpose. And
Right.
then, versus when I got down to Kuwait and we were sitting on top of the brass and it was nothing but bullshit the entire time. Like that stress was awful. And
Right. Right.
was not good for me at all. So yeah, having all those and I can only imagine, the just staying awake at night. Let's say if you have a signal loss and it's out for a while and just sitting there like, well, there's nothing I can do. Like, hopefully I programmed this thing right.
Yeah.
Hopefully it makes it way back and I can
Yeah.
get back and not crash this, I'm sure,
And-
several $1 million worth of piece of equipment.
Yeah.
And everybody on the inside, like all the higher ranks, they're freaking out at this point because that's a lot of money in the sky.
Yeah.
And not just that, but our missions that we're on, especially downrange, are extremely important. Like we get tasked out by like the highest echelons.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people have eyes on our feed, are like super high ranking, like generals and stuff have eyes on our feed. And so if we're not out there, it's like our warrant officers are getting heat for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys have a good awareness of this, both being E7s. I don't want you guys to say anything that's going to get you in trouble. Yeah. So if there is anything you guys can't tell me or can't expand on, like I totally understand because when you talk about like high ranking people watching this stuff, I'm not going to ask you like, oh yeah, like which politicians did you have tuning in?
We don't know that stuff. We're kept in the dark. Yeah, like and that's another thing we struggle at is like, we don't have, a lot of times we go into things and we don't have context. We have the minimal information that we need to know to like execute the mission.
Yeah.
And as the mission goes on, you can start to know more things as you put them together, but we're not told anything. Like we could be on a high value target and that's all we know is a high value target. We don't know shit else.
Yeah.
Like nothing else. Like they don't tell us much of anything like
well, in a way
at all.
Protect you as well. I mean,
yeah, because you like start to question like, what am I doing? Like, like what is going on here?
The high value target could be a house, and like that aircraft or that crew, those two people could be staring at the house for
hours,
10 hours, but the aircraft's been in that same spot for days.
Yeah.
And then we're just staring at this house and like, and then you do a crew change, you do a crew handover, and you're like, y'all see anything? Like, no. Did you see anything? No, no action. And so yeah, you just staring at, you just staring at this spot.
I can imagine it's a lot like probably like a lot like snipers in the how they'll lay on a hillside for days,
Yeah,
nothing
yeah.
happens, and then all of a sudden everything's
Ooh,
crazy for
yes.
a moment,
Yeah.
and then
I
it's all
have
gone again. Like,
Yeah, I have a crazy story about like this thing. It's kind of out of sequence, but it's perfect.
fine.
Like me and my friend, one of another soldiers, we were flying. We were watching over this city, and it had one long road entrance in and out. That's it. On one entrance, one long road, and the city and town we had been watching for hours upon hours, and we hadn't seen not one soul, no movement, anything, nothing. And the local army was getting geared up ready to come in down this long road to go clear the town. And they had a leading the convoy into this town. They had a white pickup truck with a machine gun mounted on the back of it, right? And so this guy is driving backwards, right? So his machine gunner is on the back with his 50 cal, and then he's driving backwards, and they're going down this road backwards into this town, and like 500 vehicles are behind them. Like it's this huge convoy. And I mean, we hadn't seen a soul for hours. And within not even, they get probably within a football field distance of the town entrance, and here comes a V-bid. And we didn't even have enough time to call on the radio, hey, there's a V-bid, before they already saw the V-bid. Like it was instant. And when, they're that close to friendlies, we can't do anything about it because now we're a danger to the friendlies too. So we couldn't do anything but watch. And so the V-bid, so a V-bid is a vehicle-borne IED. So it's a car that's made to explode.
my gears were turning. I was like, I know this term. What the crap does it mean?
Yeah. So the V-bid is coming towards the truck that was going backwards, leading the charge with the 50 cal in the back. And so now this truck is going forwards, but the whole convoy is still coming towards them. And so they're each like realizing what's going on. And it's like a trickle effect down the convoy. Like, shit, stop, put it in reverse. Like, what are we doing? And so the V-bid catches up to the pickup truck and gets right beside it. And the 50 cal gunner jumps off, and they're going like 60 miles an hour, like trying to get away. And like, in the V-bid right here. And so the gunner jumps off. And then right as the V-bid explodes, the driver of that pickup truck just bails. And I'm like, what did I just watch? Like, we just sat here for hours and didn't see a soul. And now this just happened within 2 seconds. Like, what just happened? And then, like, yeah, it's just crazy stuff like that all the time happening.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I think that it would be a good transition to if we got into you guys have done training, you went and you've been establishing the whole thing. So how long did you guys do that for? And then when did that lead up to like first deployment?
Less than a year and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Within I think a year and a half, we were gone and deployed to Afghanistan for me for the first time.
Okay. And
You too?
you guys still hadn't met at this point, right?
No.
No, we haven't been.
He had went to Afghanistan, but he had graduated AIT like a year before me. So
Okay.
he had did his year and a half, went to Afghanistan for 9-10 months. And then as he was doing that, I was at my unit getting ready to replace his unit. And then that's when we met in Afghanistan.
Okay. So what was first deployment like for you, Trey?
My first deployment was crazy. Okay, so now we're pushing forward. In the unit, there's 3 things as a pilot of these drones. There's 3 things you can be. You can be just a pilot, or you can be a AO. I mean, a pilot is just an AO. It's just an aircraft operator. Okay. Or you can be an IO, which is an instructor operator. Or you can be an AC, which is an aircraft commander. So you're above an IO. You're in between. You're in like the in between phase. But as an AC, you basically drive the mission. So
you're the captain basically of the
aircraft
team.
in the entire the aircraft as well as the mission. You have to make sure that the mission happens. You have to make sure the aircraft gets up on time.
Yeah,
like you're the overseer of all that stuff.
Okay.
So
they handle these things a lot like if you were actual crew on an aircraft.
Yeah.
In an office.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And so because coming from AIT, coming from school, learning how to fly these things, when I got from AIT and got to my first unit, which was in Fort Stewart, Georgia, when I got there wasn't a unit at all. They actually sent us from Fort Stewart. I had to report to Hunter Army Airfield, which was in Savannah.
Yeah.
And Stewart was in Hinesville. So they're an hour apart. And when I was in Savannah, we was just really would show up for PT in the morning, and we would come, shit, shower, shave, and come back to work, and we would just hang out for like 3 hours, and we would go home for the rest of the day because there was nothing for us to do. Like, we didn't have any aircraft. There was nothing for us to do. We weren't even in the right place.
Yeah. And
so that for me, that was my experience. Like, again, I'm college. Like, my experience was college. That was like just freedom for me. And then the actual equipment came. And so, mind you, like we've hit on, we don't know how to do, like, not us as the new people, the unit is not stood up. So nobody knows how to do anything.
Yeah.
Right. And by the way, the unit just stood up, as in, like, we just got the first commander for the unit, period. And so we go from Hunter to Hinesville with our equipment, and we go and learn how to put this shit together. That was my first experience of going into the unit, learning how to put in. And when I say learning, I'm not talking about learning from someone. I'm talking about
figuring it out,
learning how to put this whole operation together.
PMs and AMs and
insane.
Way underpaid.
Insane. Okay.
Now, the book says it should do this, but when I do that shit doesn't work.
Right.
When I do it, it falls over. And by the way, the unit just stood up, and we just figured out that we have a deployment in 11 months.
Yeah.
And we don't know anything about, forget the mission. We don't even know how to put the equipment together. We don't even know the pieces of the puzzle. Forget the equipment. We don't even know how to operate functionally
as a unit,
like as a team together. So my experience was just like, figure it out. I mean, that was it. And so now fast forward, we figure it all out. We get to the deployment, and as soon as we get off the plane, boom, IED. I mean, not IED.
The mortar.
Yeah, we get incoming. Boom, boom. The runway gets lit up. I say, oh my God, this is real. Yeah. And right before that, the pilot came over the thing and he made like a little announcement. I didn't hear what he said because I was asleep. But I don't know, a lot of people don't know this, but what is it called? A combat landing.
Yeah.
Man. Talking about a way to wake up. What?
You got the big ass plane coming down.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I've told people to look up videos of like C-130, C-17 combat.
Yes.
Oh man.
I don't know. It feels like 500 miles an hour and whip.
Yeah.
And it feels like the aircraft is legit, like you're about to die. Like the aircraft's falling out the sky.
You go from like kind of chilling to all of a sudden like, whoa.
Yeah. I did a re-enlistment ceremony in Iraq, and they flew me on a Black Hawk and did a few combat landings. It was like the coolest experience ever.
But so yeah, we get to my first deployment, and boom, we get the IED, and I keep saying IED, but we get the incoming, and that was my first reality of like, okay, it's go time. Like, it's go time. And so we get all the equipment off. We get everything set up, and we start the missions. And so again, because we had all that stuff going on, trying to figure out everything before we got to the deployment. When we got to the deployment, what we had to figure out is the key personnel. So who's going to be an AC? Like, who's going to be in charge of the aircraft? Who's going to be in charge of getting this thing up on time and yada, yada, yada. So I was nominated as AC, like, out of the gate, but I didn't have the formal training of an AC.
Yeah,
because
kind of just waived it because you needed AC, but nobody had the proper requirement.
Yeah.
But the top of the class would,
yeah, and
get the AC.
And they were like, "This guy's got his crap together. We're gonna make him do it."
Yeah.
And they basically judged it upon like who was putting in, like, I guess your capabilities of figuring things out because of how we had to establish the company and the time we had to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just basically got set in the fire, and so I just figured it out. And again, we kind of, for my unit, I was the one that kind of put the AC program together. Like, I helped put that program together because I was one of the first ones in the unit to be an AC. So yeah, that was my initial experience. But as far as the missions, they started out boring. They started out really, really, really boring. We started out, you'd be looking at dirt, and or you'd be following this vehicle, and the vehicle just go to the house, and now you just got to stare at the house. And again, you're doing this at this time we was doing it for not 10 hours but 12-hour flights because we didn't have a lot of people.
Yeah.
At the unit period, so we was doing 12 hours flight,
7 days a week.
7 days a week, and you get that one day off, one day off every 14 days.
Wow.
And then my mission started getting a little bit more hectic, a little bit more complex, I would say, to the matter of the people that was in charge of us, like in charge of our eyes, in charge of what we look at. They started putting the pieces together, and us being the eyes on the ground, we started putting pieces together, and we're kind of communicating together, and because when we went there, it was basically like a quiet operation, honestly. But there was stuff going on, but we didn't have all the intel that we needed to figure out what was going on.
And a lot of times, like, you have different people can request you as an asset, right? So depending on who requests you, it depends on what kind of team you're working for. Like, sometimes we can go in and work for the JTAC who's on the ground, and we're working directly with that person we're looking at. Other times it's like through a task force, and we're talking to a commander that's in another talk somewhere. So it really just depends. But a lot of times, especially in this beginning period, those people didn't know how to use our asset properly. And from our side, we didn't even really know how our asset could be utilized properly. And so there is still always like a period when, like, you're working with people who've never worked together before, and you're trying to figure it out. You know what I mean? It's not a seamless thing that just happens, So, like, especially like when we're working for like an infantry unit or something like that, they really have to understand us and what we can do and how they can utilize us. Because sometimes if we get allocated to them on the mission, they'll just throw us somewhere, and they don't really even know how to use us. So we're basically just thrown somewhere, not really being allocated and utilized properly.
Do you think that is something that the Army should kind of what we're trying to say, a more universal training needs to be touched on within like infantry units? Or
it was a time thing?
It was a time thing. I think it was just,
it hadn't been developed.
Yeah, as we were getting
better now, they're more familiar with, and
yeah, from like the time we joined the Army to like where we got out at, it was like 9 years, 10 years later. It had came a long way.
It's like me trying to sell you a product, but I don't know what the product is capable of. So how can I hit your points without even knowing what I can, about the product at all?
But so our first deployment, I don't even know if you shot any.
No, I didn't shoot. So again, our mission was very boring. But what we was figuring out what we was a huge part of on that situation was figuring out like the automative parts of the capabilities of the aircraft, of what it can do, how you can program it in the sky to do like combat things is what we initially was a part of. And then like Ashley was saying, her unit came and replaced my unit, and she was the one to first get action. And so
no, we didn't shoot that deployment.
Oh no?
No, we only shot the second deployment. The first deployment for us was kind of about the same for him, like super like mundane, like you're not really sure what you're looking at. You're looking at sand or some tunnel system or something. Like it was very boring.
Which is amazing because even in 2009, it was at the tail end of everything. Like they had started, like I think in 2008 was when it was announced we were going to start winding up the drawdown of forces and things. And then, I joined in 2009. I deployed in 2011, I think. But even then, it was like the news, like, oh, drones, they're going to bomb stuff. They take out enemy assets. That's like all you ever heard about.
Right.
You guys are still like 5 years removed from that.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we didn't do shit.
Yeah, we didn't do anything. No, yeah, and Afghanistan was super boring, like super, super boring. We got like, it was funny because that deployment, we got bombed all the time. Like mortars and rockets were just hitting us left and right. Like our barracks rooms, our like aircraft, like our airfield, our aircraft, like we're getting lit up all the time. Like I'm talking about like.
And the way it is that place is just, it's like mountains all the way around you. Mm-hmm. And they would just, like the enemy would just literally be all around you. And you would just see it. Like when it's happening, you'll see like a flash of light. And you're like, freaking incoming is about to come. Yeah. You can see it. Like at nighttime, you can just see it. All the people. It's insane. Like we were sitting ducks at this place.
Mm-hmm.
And Bagram.
Bagram? Okay.
Yep. We were sitting ducks.
And like bottom of the valley or whatever, isn't it? Or am I misremembering that?
Bagram is literally like a bowl of like it sits in a bowl of mountains.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was what we experienced. The missions were very boring, but in real life, it was just like you just boom, 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 or like trying to go to sleep. It's like,
yeah,
I don't know. And sometimes they'll be like so close or like it'll hit, like you were asleep, but it hit your gym that you go to.
Yeah.
And you just think about that, like, man, that could have been me.
Yeah.
Like, things of that nature. So you're also dealing with that. And it being your first deployment and you're trying to figure out these different positions and all that stuff. Like I remember one day walking from work. It was me and two other the ACs. We was walking from work and we were walking to the barracks, and the way it was set up was where we slept and where we worked was probably like a 15 to 20 minute walk.
Yeah.
And
which is long in the desert and the heat.
Yeah, it's taxing.
With all your gear on, like
it's taxing. And so we're walking, and I just remember hearing the alarms go off after this happened. What happened was it was me, Kopak, and a dude named Barnes. And we was walking back, and we just heard, and we just saw the trail of smoke, literally like here.
Like between your guys' heads.
And it was a female. If the male and the female had traded, it probably would have been like literally probably like a foot off his head. It was so close. And it hit so we have T-walls that surround the outside of where we actually stay, like our living quarters.
Yeah.
T-walls are the big brick concrete.
Yeah.
I don't even know how big, but we had T-walls all around our living quarters. And I saw it when it hit the T-wall. It was just a rocket. It wasn't a, what do you call it?
Mortar.
It wasn't a mortar or artillery round that comes in. It was a freaking rocket. and I seen it when it hit the T wall, and man, it's like I almost locked up because of like the fear, like the thoughts that went through my head at that time. It was just like, man, it was so close, and then I just saw everybody else running, and so I started running, but in my mind the whole time I'm thinking like, Jesus, that was so close. And then we get lit up with, I think, like 3 or 4 mortars come in right after that, and they aimed at the same place, like aimed at our living quarter. And so we actually get it's funny because so it was double stacked. There was 2 floors, and my room was like the 4th room down on the 2nd floor. And I think the other guy's room was like the 5th room down on the 2nd floor. And the girl's room was like the 3rd room down. And I couldn't find my key. And I'm like fumbling for my key. And mind you, I'm like, we're getting bombed, like boom, boom. They're coming in. And
It's not like that. Your bear's room's gonna do much though.
yeah, it's not. But it's just like
like a psychological thing.
It's like something, you got something, or at least if I go with my belongings, you know, like Jesus.
I can teddy bear as I.
Yeah, but long story short, like I never could, like I was so scared, like I couldn't even get in my room, like I couldn't find my key, not alone get the key in, like I couldn't find it, and so I just jet back down, I go into the bunkers, and
You're safer there.
In my roommate. I looked to my left, my roommate and the guy that was beside me. He was like beside me in the bunk. He just smiled, and I didn't know that they was there. But that's how like fearful I was at that moment. Like it literally paralyzed me to where like I didn't know my left or right. Like I didn't know anything. I was like oblivious to the situation. I was just like not even there at the moment. I was just straight adrenaline mode.
And it's crazy because like unless it's that close, you get so used to it. Like, whatever. We're getting bombed again. Like it's not a big deal. Here we go. Gotta do what is it? Where you make sure everybody's alive.
Oh, I forgot. But yeah, you gotta call in.
Yeah.
Call in and make sure everybody's present.
Good, yeah. Like
yeah. So
that was our first deployment. So wasn't a lot of action.
Who's watching horror movies and they're yelling at the screen when the person's fumbling with the key to get into the door.
Yeah,
that's real.
Yeah,
like, no man, like it's real hard to unlock a door.
Yeah, seriously.
That's wild. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, like you say, you do get used to like if it's an all the time kind of thing, but that first time definitely shakes you a little bit. And
yeah,
I can only imagine in Afghanistan because if that was like a couple of years after, because stuff still went on for Afghanistan for a few years after I left Iraq. But I remember as we were closing down, things were getting worse. You know, they were emboldened. They're like, oh, the armies turn tail and run, and we could come in and start messing with them and stuff. So like the bombings, they would ebb and flow, but they were definitely getting worse near the end. And I can imagine that was a big thing for them in Afghanistan because at that point it's basically like because in America is like we've moved on. Like oh, the war's over. We don't even realize people are still in Afghanistan.
Right.
So those guys. Now's our time.
And the hardest part, I think, was the rules of engagement were a lot more strict on us when we were in Afghanistan versus when we went to Iraq.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, in the beginning of Iraq, it was like you would get your ROE and your LOW for the morning. They'd be like, listen, anybody wearing a red shirt, they're done.
Yep. Seriously. Like, oh, yeah. And that's the crazy part is before I went to Iraq and Afghanistan, like both places, I thought that they were pretty similar. You know what I mean? Like, I really thought like I was, and I feel like might get taken in a bad way, but like America is so closed-minded. Like they don't see outside of America. You know what I mean? And they're really like, they don't know what really goes on in other places, like they don't know the norms of other cultures because like America is what the whole world idolizes, you know what I mean? So it's like, why would I pay attention about what's going on in Iraq and Afghanistan, But when you go and see these places, I thought Iraq and Afghanistan were extremely similar, not just in terrain and like typography, I guess you can say, but like, and how they dress and like the structures of the buildings, the architecture. I thought that they were all the same. Not at all. Completely two separate things.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, even you talk about like mountains of Afghanistan, still people think like, oh, Afghanistan's a desert. Like, Iraq
No
desert. Like Afghanistan has desert,
desert,
Yeah.
but it is mountains, like
and then you tell
huge mountains.
anybody that both those countries have small portion of coastline. They're like, wait, what? What? Like, yeah,
Yeah.
like I was when I was in Iraq, I was near the coast. Like, I saw the coast. I flew over in a Black Hawk. Like, I flew over palm trees and
Yeah. There was palm trees in Iraq. Yeah.
like, there's green stuff out there. It's wild. So
Yeah. Desert palms. Yeah.
definitely not something I was going to come home and tell people that yeah, I saw like miles and fields of green in Iraq.
Yeah. It's crazy.
So I did have one thing that popped in my head. You said you came from Savannah to go. How long did it take you to get over the hangover from going to River Street all the time once you deployed?
Oh man. So that was actually a story about River Street. Uh
And a scar to go with it.
yeah, and a scar to go with it. So on my chin, obviously you can't see it, but so I got a scar here
Yeah,
and I got jumped on
really?
River Street.
Wow.
I honestly don't remember
You
much
was
about it. I was drunk. I was
It's
drunk
River
as
Street,
hell.
man.
I was drunk as hell. I was outside of the McDonald's, the walk through McDonald's, walk through, drive through, whatever. But the people I was with was inside the McDonald's, and I just chose to stay out because I was so drunk. I just needed the fresh air.
Yeah,
And yeah, I got hit with a crowbar. Boom.
really? Wow.
Like right under my chin. I really don't remember. What I remember, I'll go into it a little bit. What I remember is that when we was in some bar, and my friend, I think it was just about a female. I think he was hitting on this dude's female. He was hitting on a female and this dude got involved and we ended up leaving and that was it. And I was a part of that. And so again, I was by myself outside McDonald's. And it was him and another guy. They was inside. They was ordering food inside. And those dudes showed back up and boom, it was crazy.
Wow.
And from there, like I just woke up in the hospital. Like I just blacked out. Like I got hit and that was it.
Wow.
And yeah, I had to, we had to report about that. When we got back to the unit, I had to report about it and tell what happened. And my story was the same, just like I'm telling you. I was standing outside McDonald's.
I don't know.
That's literally the only thing I remember. I've seen this big group of people that we saw in the club. I seen them outside, and that was the last thing I remember.
I know River Street gets crazy, man, because like the
Yeah,
law
River Street.
with booze down the street and like you
Yeah.
said,
Yep.
the
Yeah,
water
Wet Willie's.
windows and the Rangers are there at Fort Stewart and because they would go to Army Hunter and they would
Yeah.
jump off and do their oh my goodness, they're jumping out of planes and stuff, training and all that for that. So yeah, I know I have buddies and stuff that have plenty of stories of like Rangers just taking over entire bars and stuff out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I took us way off the path with that one, but you did your deployment, your first, and you're setting everything up, and then so your Ashley's first deployment was coming in to replace. You said
Right.
you guys crossed paths, so you did like left seat, right seat kind of thing. He was
Yeah, like a 2-week handover. Yeah.
gotcha. Okay, and then you said that your first deployment followed pretty much the
Yeah.
same idea.
Yeah.
First.
Yeah.
Okay, so where do we go from there?
So, when you deploy, it's like a process. So it's like you have you got to train, make sure you're like good on your platform up into training. And then you have pre-deployment stuff where you have to like process everything, get all your equipment ready, and then you deploy. And then it's kind of the same thing when you get back, you have to like in process back to the States. You get like 2 weeks worth of leave, and then you come back and then you have to put your unit back together, and then it's the same cycle, train, and then you deploy again. So it was very quick, like within another year and a half, I'd say we were deploying again to Iraq. And why I was in Iraq, he was in Afghanistan, and we still didn't know each other at this time. And for that deployment, for both of us, it was like a complete switch from our first deployment. We knew going into it that we were going to have a lot more shots and we were going to have to practice our gunnery. And I was not prepared for the extent that we were going to shoot, I guess you could say. While we were downrange, both of us, we had, well, our aircraft platform shoots Hellfires, and Apaches also shoot Hellfires. And so we, between our units and the Apaches, we had a Hellfire shortage in the world. Like, that's how much we were shooting. And my cousin actually worked at Lockheed Martin, who made the missiles or whatever. And so they were like telling us like, we can't keep up with your demand. I'm like, oh my, okay. So, but going into that, I had ranked up to become a sergeant. I was an E5 and I was an aircraft commander, and I also was the company's unit movement officer. So I was in charge of getting all our equipment overseas.
You would have been my buddy then.
Yeah. So that was a whole ordeal in itself. But because I was getting all our equipment over, I went early. I went like 2 to 3 weeks early.
Yep.
And I flew with our equipment overseas with one other person. So it was me, this other person, I think he was a specialist. And it was pretty cool because like we stopped in Spain and we had like 24 hours to kind of like explore, and it was just us, and that was really cool. It is scary though, like, you know, most people are scared to hop on a plane to go to New Jersey, let alone like crossing the world with millions of dollars worth of equipment, you know what I mean? But did that, and I got to the unit, and we were doing like, I got like an early handover from the unit that was there. So I started sitting in on the missions, and one of the first missions that I sat in on, it was so they were watching a group of 3 guys, and I'm talking about, it was like the weirdest thing ever because I think of it like, what's that? They're like in white marshmallow suits, like Michelin guy looking suits, like with flamethrowers. Yeah, like hazmat suits with flamethrowers and RPGs. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, is this real life? You know what I mean? Like, because a part of, you're looking at it through a screen. So you're like trying to process that this is actually going on in real life, you know? And so that we started following the group of 3 people, and they cleared us hot, and it was like super confusing because they were like cleared hot, board, cleared hot. And so the instructor was like, what the heck is going on? Like, you know, like if you're not sure if we should shoot, should we actually shoot, you know, like type situation. But anyways, they ended up getting the okay and shooting. And so at the last minute, they went into like a building. And when I say building, I use that term loosely because they have like concrete brick structures that don't really have roofs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they kind of split up a little bit. So they're like, if they split, go like keep eyes on the one or target the one with the RPG. So that's what they did. And then the wall pretty much caved in on the guy. And so the 2 out of the 3 people, after we shoot, there's like a little second delay where they're like, oh shit, what's going on? But then they take off and run for dear life. And so we start, but they wanted, I don't remember if they wanted us to keep eyes on the guy who had the RPG or to follow them. But usually they had us follow them. And at some point, I think either we couldn't, because in Iraq, it's city. So it's like really hard to keep track of people. You know what I mean? When there's so many buildings and so it's really hard to keep track of things. So we ended up just going back to the site where they had the impact site. And so we were eyes on for probably like 5 to 10 minutes. And they had, you know, said that the guy was KIA. And the 2 guys came back for this guy, and they start like, they were trying to like like firemen's carry the guy, but he was in bad shape, like really bad shape. And so they started dragging him, and like as they were dragging him, his left foot falls off, like from like his ankle down, it just falls off. And so the guys are dragging them, and they're like getting slower and slower, and then they're like, we can't take you. And then they just left him, and then they take off, and then the guy just starts like rolling down the street. Like, I have no idea where you're going, but he was rolling down the street probably to get to safety or something. I don't know. But yeah, that was like my first introduction to like, oh shit, like this is what your next deployment is going to look like. And at that moment, you have to kind of decide of like who you are as a person and how you're going to deal with these things. You know what I mean? Like, it kind of like, you never really know how you're going to deal with those situations till you get put in it. And then it's like, okay, from here, you have to like mentally be strong. And you know what I mean? Like, yeah. And throughout that deployment, it was a lot. Like, that was the most stressful deployment I've ever had. Like, we were constantly working, like no time off, shots after shots, like 20 shots a day was easy for our unit. Like, it was a lot of flight time, a lot of interacting with other national armies and working with JTAC forces on the ground, which was rewarding. That was probably the most rewarding part about that deployment, was like, you know, being able to save people. Like, one of my friends, she shot a VBID as it was coming towards this group of special forces, and like she got it just in the nick of time, and they came and like to our unit like to personally thank her and stuff, which is like really, I'm gonna get emotional.
Yeah.
Stuff like that like makes you really feel like you have a purpose, you know, behind what you're doing. But then other things happened at deployment where it was like, I kind of questioned my purpose of being here and stuff. And then you start to like see how other people, because I mean, I went from being a sergeant to a sergeant promotable at the time. And like, I think I was a squad leader, platoon sergeant maybe at the time. And like seeing how other soldiers dealt with stuff like that. Like, you know, not everybody deals with that stuff the same.
Yeah.
And some people like kind of go crazy and they kind of go Rambo and like, I don't care what I kill. And like, you got to kind of like check that, you know, and or you have people who just break down, or people who become suicidal, or people who are okay with it, or they look like they're okay with it, but they really internalize it. You know what I mean? So you as a leader, I think I was put to the test tremendously on that deployment to like, you know, actually look to my left and right and care about the soldiers around me, you know, and make sure that everybody's mental health was good at the time. But the funny thing about this deployment was, so I was there before my unit got there, and the day my unit showed up, I was already training with the other unit to like make sure I was good enough to train down range, because we got to get trained and then we train our own people. That's kind of how it works.
Right.
And so if I got trained, I could start training our people. And so on my last flight, we were coming in for freaking landing, and we had a turbocharge failure. And so when your turbocharge goes out, you can't hold or maintain altitude. And so we just crashed at the end of the runway. And then I felt like shit because I had just got there. It wasn't my unit. It wasn't my unit's equipment. And then the people of that unit had to go recover that aircraft, and it was outside the wire, and I was like, oh my gosh. And it was the day my unit showed up, so my commander's like, what's going on? And I'm like, no.
And on us, sir.
So I was known around the community as Butterfingers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
With that one, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. I read a paper once, if I remember correctly, it was titled "At 30,000 Feet," and it was talking about pilots and fighter pilots and of large aircraft.
Right.
You you know, bombings and gun runs and stuff, and you know, all they see is a screen. It's not like infantry, where it's the it can still be tough, obviously, but it's not the exact same experience and how it differs.
Yeah, it's like it's extremely different, right? Because when you're in a situation, like if you're in a physical event, say like I'm getting to like I'm shooting at this person, I'm in troops in contact physically, like your brain kind of sort of traumatically, your brain kind of like blurs that part out sometimes. You know what I mean? Like you don't remember the situation as it really happened because your brain tries to compensate to like make it not hurt so bad, you know? And I think to a degree that happens to us too. And obviously, like being in physical danger is a lot differently than looking at something through a screen and seeing stuff. But a lot of weight was on our shoulders because like it wasn't like we're just playing a game. Like we literally had people's life or like death in our fingertips. You know what I mean? If we didn't make this shot, if we didn't do this, if we did make this shot and we shot the wrong people or we shot the wrong target or we were 2 feet off or whatever, like now you're harming other people who shouldn't be harmed, or you could have killed this person to protect your troops, or it's extremely stressful. But you got to think about it like we're looking beyond the front lines, right? So you have the front line of troops of where our team starts, I guess you could say, like our country starts, and then we're beyond that. So we're looking forward and we're pushing like forward beyond that a lot of times. And we're looking at things in extreme detail, like extreme detail. Like I've watched somebody get blown up in half in like 10x zoom, you know what I mean? Like, and then sit there and flail around, like forced to watch stuff like that over and over and over again, repeatedly on a daily basis, for 9 months. Like, so like it kind of like got joked about for a long time of like, oh, you're just UAS, like you're just a pogue, like you just sit and, like basically they kind of like put our mental health to the side, like it was a joke because of what we were doing. But I think after our deployment where we were so actively engaged with people who were actually in the fight, and it was like I feel like a real team fight, and like they really knew our importance at that time and we were working cohesively at the time together. I think that started to kind of change in the community and they started to take our mental health a lot serious.
Well, I think what happened in all is like we established ourselves as a platform in general, like in the military society, as a whole, when it comes to like she was talking about the different countries, because we were working beside different countries. My second deployment, I was working very, very closely with MARSOC, so the Marine Special Forces, and was a huge asset to them. She just told you about her deployment and all the intricacies that happened in that aspect. Like we would and we were shooting and helping people so much. We like the world couldn't support how much ammunition we needed.
Right.
So like that was huge. That was a huge establishment. Like that was an eye opener for like the not the UAS community, but like
the military. Yeah.
In general, like, and so that gave our community the spotlight. Like, okay, let's focus on these guys and keep a better eye on them because they are actually doing a lot of work. It is like I think that was the transformation. Like, during those years, the spotlight came on the community to where like these guys are really doing a lot. Like they're shooting, they're deploying, they're setting up, they're tearing down. They're doing these JRTC rotation. They're doing NTC rotations. They're creating gunnery scripts, from the scripts all the way to the programs, to the MC programs, the AC programs. Like,
and we were doing things like within other units too. So like for our battalion, we would put together a manned, unmanned script to where we're working with an Apache or we're working with another aircraft to be able to, joint simultaneously take out a target, And so, as we start developing these relationships with external forces, like we start to gain their respect and they start to understand how we can utilize each other and in that aspect. So
not only were we like pushing the limits of like ourselves and our leadership skills and like the limits of our peers, but we was also like pushing the limits of other platforms, like far as like the Apaches, like what the Apaches used to couldn't do, now they can because of us.
Yeah.
So like we was extending their capabilities as well. So,
Same thing with A10s
and the same thing for infantry guys,
Yeah.
like
Target,
it,
different angles.
Yep.
yeah, like and we got used to an instant, like if it was one unit, a ground unit on this side of a mountain and another ground unit on that side of the mountain, and they couldn't communicate because of the mountain,
Yeah.
well, they would just put our asset in the sky, and we would be the translator. We would be like the relay, so we will allow them to communicate, and so and as well as see, they would be able to see on both sides. So like there was so many ways that the community started to develop and see, like, utilize us, and now I think that we really have established ourselves in the community, although we're not in anymore. I think that like that platform has very
Now it's in all the movies.
yeah,
And
now it's in
everything.
the movies, and now it's all futuristic, and yeah, it's crazy to be a part of that, to know that like we kind of started that. Yeah, that's crazy.
Awesome. Yeah, it's I relate to it a little bit in the idea of, like you said, you were a UMO, and so like I was a pogue, and infantry always made fun of us all the time
Yeah.
until your stuff had to move, and then
Yeah, like you're a necessary part of the team.
they would come in and sit down next to us and realize they have no idea what to do, and we would save them and make stuff work. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, okay, I guess like you guys are kind of useful.
Yeah, yeah.
I feel you on that one with that. Part of that paper that I had read, it was talking about how one of the pilots, the only thing that he said that got him through was being able to compartmentalize. So like you say, it's on a screen or whatever. He basically just like told himself that it wasn't real.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
If he had made it real for him, he's like, I don't think I would have been able to continue
deal with it.
what I did. So I can only imagine, and especially you say that you saw in such detail.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I didn't really even think about, and I'm sure a lot of people don't think about just how advanced a lot of the optics are nowadays, where you can't see stuff that well from so far away.
Yeah.
That's I think a pretty wild thought.
Yeah, and so far as like dealing, like not necessarily dealing with all the stuff, but like I would say how it all played out.
But I was gonna say, like, I think a big difference that's in the Army
Oh, okay.
versus Air Force community, because we both fly drones, right?
Yeah.
The Army, the Army's drone pilots are enlisted. And enlisted for both sides, the aircraft operator and the payload operator side, they're both enlisted. And you're trained on both, right? So you one flight you might fly the aircraft, or even in one flight you can fly both seats. And so, but as an enlisted member, right, comes a lot of additional responsibilities, I guess you can say, and taskings from division, battalion, brigade. Like, oh, we have to have all these CQ shifts and have these duties filled, and we're running trash. I need 2 people from your unit, but our unit is our UAV operators. You know what I mean? So it's like we're getting tasked and pulled in all these different ways, but yet in the same facet, we have to do all the same requirements and training that the officers have to do. And like if you were a helicopter pilot, we would have the same exact requirements of them, but we would also be treated as we were enlisted and have all these other additional duties that we had to do. On top of, like, as you rank, you have additional duties that you have to do. So it's like
like a lot of people think.
Yeah, like it's crazy. Like you have to be a magician with a hat full of all these different tasks and things that you can do. And I think that really put me to the test of, like, it's not that I'm good at one thing. I'm just good at my biggest thing is I'm just focused, driven, and like I'm like a perfectionist. So like whatever I do, I got to do it good. You know what I mean? Like I just expect a lot from myself, and I think that's what helped me carry me so far. But being a female in the military was extremely difficult, I would say. Like that, like I've gotten a lot of questions like, would you recommend that my niece or my daughter goes into the military? And I can't even give them like a yes. Like I don't regret my time in the military by any means. I think it really made me who I am, and I would do it again if I had the chance, but at the same point in time, I'm glad it's over with. You know what I mean? But I would never let my daughter or probably my son even go into the military, but my daughter for sure would be like, no, you're absolutely not doing it.
So, but yeah, I stuff like that. I only try to ask about if the guest brings up because I try not to dive into anything anybody would be uncomfortable with. But I assume you look fairly similar a few years back in the military as you do now,
Mhm.
being thin and blonde and walking around on an army base in Afghanistan. I can understand where you would have apprehension because like we would see some females in other units who just the assumption because she's a thin blonde girl in this other unit, like, oh, she doesn't do anything, or whatever. Like,
Yeah,
there was one that was a National Guard unit that we were deployed with, and they're like, why is she even here? Like, what does she do with a National Guard unit? Kind of. So I can only assume that you have maybe experienced something.
yeah. It's like I'm an open book. So like from the first time I got to my unit, my platoon sergeant, I got, you get to your unit and you get your equipment and CIF gear and everything. And I didn't know how to attach the rook into like the back part, you know what I mean? And so he's like, "Oh, I'll just come to the barracks room after we get off work and I'll help you put it together." I didn't think anything of it. Like, okay, yeah, sure. You know what I mean? And boom, bad situation. He pulls me on the bed. He starts trying to like kiss me. And I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? You're my platoon sergeant. Like, how am I supposed to navigate this situation? You know what I mean? And then I told one of my friends, and she's like, "Oh, he's been harassing me since AIT." And so we brought it to higher, and then he got removed from there. But I mean, like, as far as like punishment goes, I don't think he ever got punished for it or anything. He just went to a different unit, and that was it. But like from that to like, you're in a dominantly guy world. You know what I mean? So like me just trying to get a ride to the grocery store because I didn't have a car. Like, do they think I'm trying to get with them because I'm just asking for a ride to the grocery store? You know what I mean? Or like, oh, now they give me a ride to the grocery store. Now, do they want something from me? Or you know what I mean? Like, or is this person really my friend, or are they just trying to get with me? Like just stuff like that. Like, or even, and then it's either like as a female you either have to be a bitch or you're gonna get or people are gonna think that you're like fucking your way to the top pretty much. You know what I mean? And there's like no in between. Like I very rarely have seen a female be able to pull it off, but there's always people who's gonna say, oh, you're messing with this person, oh, you're messing with this person. You're like, I'm just friends with this person. You know what I mean? I can't have friends. Like I was the only when I went to his unit, I was the only female NCO in the entire unit, and you're not supposed to hang out with the lower enlisted. So it was like no matter what I did, I was gonna get in trouble. And it was just like, this is crazy. And I chose to do the right thing and not hang out with the lower enlisted and hang out with my peers, but I still got scrutinized for that.
Yeah.
And it was just like, Jesus. And it was like never ending. Like it's just always something. And it's like no matter how much work I put into being like a good soldier, a good aircraft operator, a good AC, a good UMO, a good master fitness trainer, a good equal opportunity leader, like FRG leader. Like I've been all these things, and it's like that doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
Well, I would like to say I wish that you had a different experience during that, and I would hope that as time goes on, we would be able to evolve, and hopefully that will get better, especially
Yeah.
more females join the military. But I can't say that I haven't experienced entirely like that because I mean, being in transportation, there was a lot of females
Oh,
there,
that's true. Yeah.
and it was one of those where it's like, I mean, myself, like I try to stay out a lot of that kind of stuff, and yes, that I did meet, females that were the what do they call it, the I don't remember what the unit, whatever, they were banging everybody. Um,
Yeah.
others,
Yeah.
weren't, and but it is a more complicated situation than I think a lot of people would like to admit to. Um, because I mean, I would love for just to say like, oh yeah, we should all just be able to do that and it'd be cool. That would be great. But it's like it's not the world we live in. And
Right.
males and females together cohabitating like that, when people go like, oh well, like why would a general be concerned about that? As long as they're not being a dick about it, like
Right.
they may have seen, I have seen, like there has been problems that come up with relationships and having men and women in the same,
Yeah. Yeah.
living quarters together.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, it shouldn't happen, but we do have to try to
And
consider and as leadership handle these things the best way we can.
right. And it's a really hard path to navigate too, because like, you know, you're talking about professionalism and being like, normally when you go to work, you work a 9 to 5, you show up, you're your work person, you come home, you're a different person, right? In the military, that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Like personal relationships and your work relationships are the same. You know what I mean? You're with these people 24/7. You're deploying with these people. You almost die with these people. You're up late nights with these people. You're studying with these people. You know what I mean? You're doing things with these people. Like, so it's a really hard lane to navigate. It's not as simple as people make it seem, you know what I mean? And at the end of the day, like I look back and I'm like, I did a lot of stupid stuff and I was young. Like I didn't even know who I was. I was trying to figure myself out. You know what I mean? And like just looking back and at the growth in that, like I got to give myself grace too, because I wasn't always a perfect person, but I was young. Like who doesn't make mistakes when they're young? You know what I mean? Like it's normal for the college people to go out and party and have a good time, but it's not normal for us to do it. Like it's kind of like it's like a hard world to live in and navigate, and I see it from both sides because it's like, as an older person now, I'm like, yeah, you shouldn't be doing those things. But back then, it's like, you don't know no difference.
The hormones take over.
Yeah, like you haven't even had freedom yourself. Like I went from living with my parents to being in the army in a barracks room. You know what I mean? Like you don't know anything. You don't have any true responsibilities. And I think if the military,
that Mustang, dang.
yeah, like if the military would, I think if the military, well, the army specifically, like in the Air Force, right? You can go get a barracks room when you're E4. No, not a barracks room. You get BAH to go live on your own as an E4. And the army, you have to be a staff sergeant at E6 to do that. Like that's absolutely insane. Like let these people go live and experience life instead of like, having control over them. Because I feel like people do so many dumb things just to get out to barracks or like, yeah, like to be free a little bit.
Well, that's another one of those where I think I would say that like I agree. However, like you want to find that balance of, because there is something to
Right.
me as an E5 living with my team.
Right.
So it's like there should be some separation, sure, but it's still having that ability to be close because you are expected and you should, know your immediate people, those 4 or 5
Exactly.
there. So it's finding that way to work that out, because you don't want to become just the cool sergeant, because then that person you're probably not doing your job.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
You don't want to be the jerk sergeant that no one
Exactly.
wants.
Yeah, because now you're just being a douche for no reason, and you're not promoting people like you should because of personal reasons. Like it's crazy.